In 2003, the dismal Denver Nuggets drafted a lifeline, Carmelo Anthony, a teenager with jaw-dropping skill and an extremely impressive resume. Melo was tabbed as Nugget savior, the centerpiece of a hopeful new contender. To develop their prized youngster and manage the team around him, Denver hired veteran coach George Karl. Almost from the outset, people predicted beef. Those people predicted correctly. So let's talk about why beef between Carmelo Anthony and George Karl felt inevitable. At just 19, the rookie Melo took over as Denver's leading scorer, piloting what had been a 17-win club to a winning record and their first playoff berth since the mid-90s. Still, Carmelo was a teenager and behaved immaturely at times. His shot selection irritated veteran teammates. When they said so, the rookie responded by refusing to check into the fourth quarter of a game. Melo made headlines off the court, too. He appeared in the notorious Stop Snitching video series. He had a rough summer with the U.S. Olympic team. He entered his second season amid reports of weed in his backpack boarding the team plane and people trying to extort him with video of a nightclub fight. It was a lot. That 04-05 season didn't start too hot for the Nuggets on the floor. Denver racked up early losses, so they fired coach Jeff Bzdelik and, after a brief interim period, hired George Karl as the long-term replacement. Interesting choice. On one hand, Karl had a track record of improving NBA teams. On the other hand, each of those teams included at least one player butting heads with Karl. The coach was known for pushing his players' buttons, criticizing them in public, and he admitted sometimes struggling with alcohol and anger issues. Most recently, Karl had led the Milwaukee Bucks to the brink of the finals, while also alienating his stars. Ray Allen came to despise a coach he said talked more than he listened. In Denver, Karl quickly lived up to both sides of his billing. He led the Nuggets straight out of the losing column and into the 05 playoffs with the franchise's best record in over 15 years. And he immediately challenged Carmelo Anthony. From day one, Karl said he'd demand things his star might not like. He called Anthony a great talent who needed to learn professionalism and whose performance had plateaued. Kinda backhanded, kinda paternalistic, but get used to it. Karl would continue to praise Anthony's scoring, but almost always with the caveat about the other skills he lacked or some dig at his personality. Melo didn't help, issuing such ringing endorsements as "he is the boss and we are the workers," and "we have no choice but to listen." So even as the Nuggets season turned around, reporters wondered how long this pairing of overbearing coach and petulant star would last. Within just that first half season together, George and Carmelo fed that narrative. During a February 05 win over the Grizzlies, Karl benched Anthony for overtime, and reporters said they saw Melo throw a towel at his coach. When asked about that, the coach said, "Ask him," and the player refused to talk. Both later insisted the towel stuff was fake news, but the fact of the benching remained, and Karl raised further eyebrows by sitting Melo again in the fourth quarter of another game 2 weeks later. Both parties downplayed these decisions. Melo said it wasn't a big deal. Karl said it led to a great dialogue. A Sports Illustrated article that praised the Nuggets' second-half success under Karl also described practice quarrels. Karl called Anthony rebellious. Anthony said he'd improved under Karl, but also rolled his eyes about the coach harping on his ball-stopping tendencies. Much the same tone after some games, too. Karl nitpicks, Melo's like, "Dude, we're winning, come on." But despite conflict, despite a quick playoff loss to the powerhouse Spurs, Denver showed a lot of promise. The next 3 seasons sort of stalled on that promise. The beef stayed quiet too, with only the occasional flare-up. like Karl benching Melo again late in the '06 season, then saying he and Andre Miller didn't deserve to play. Melo just wondered why his coach couldn't keep these criticisms in-house. He also said he was the most unselfish player in the NBA. But consider the other Nuggets storylines of this era. Injuries galore, Kenyon Martin getting suspended in the middle of a playoff series, Karl's feud with Isaiah Thomas triggering a 2006 brawl that got Melo suspended for 15 games, and Denver trading for superstar Allen Iverson during that suspension. That's a lot of action, a lot of potential heat beneath the beef, yet it merely simmered at the usual temperature. Melo, Kenyon Martin, zany six-man J.R. Smith, they all had their tussles with Coach, but nothing explosive. Anthony actually signed a contract extension during this period, for a full 5 years, not just 3 like his fellow big-name draft classmates. Once Melo returned from that brawl suspension, things went fine with Allen Iverson. The Nuggets flamed out of the '07 playoffs, but reached new heights in the first full season of the Anthony-Iverson partnership. Denver set a new high watermark with 50 wins in 2008, which, in the Deep Western Conference, was only good enough for a playoff 8 seed in a first-round matchup against the mighty Los Angeles Lakers. Noteworthy because LA creaming Denver in that series directly inflamed our beef. First, Melo got a DUI arrest days before the playoffs, so that's not good. On the floor, Melo, AI, and company couldn't match the Lakers. Games 1 and 2 were double-digit losses, and by the end of an even more lopsided Game 3 in Denver, tensions burned hotter than usual. During the fourth quarter of a blowout loss, reporters observed Melo on the bench screaming at Coach Karl, repeatedly, "Don't just sit there." Afterward, Melo chastised his team for quitting. Karl disagreed and lamented his stars refusing to speak to media. He pointed out that Melo and Iverson had whiffed many easy shots, and he did have a point. The Nuggets went down in a sweep with no closure on that Game 3 blowup. Denver Stiffs soon rang in the era of Karl vs. Melo, while local columnist Woody Page diagnosed a broken truce between two egos that had once managed a fraught coexistence. Their relationship, Page said, would not survive. A summer of Melo trade rumors, reportedly pushed by Karl, seemed to validate that prediction. However, the relationship did survive. For a time, it flourished. Basically, everyone credits Chauncey Billups with helping restore peace. In November 2008, Denver traded Iverson to acquire Billups, a local-born veteran point guard with championship experience alongside Karl's close friend and fellow curmudgeon Larry Brown. Billups had enough of a reputation to earn Karl's trust, and Chauncey got along with Melo, plus, he was still quite good at basketball. It's not like Melo vs. Karl was over. For instance, the 08-09 season included an incident in which Anthony defied a Karl substitution, refusing to leave the floor for Linus Kleza. The Nuggets suspended Melo, Melo kinda apologized, Karl reveled in getting to play policeman, and everyone moved on to bigger things. Like a 54-win season and, at last, some playoff success. Denver made their first conference final since 1985 and came remarkably close to upsetting the eventual champion Lakers. That first season of George, Carmelo, and Chauncey was terrific, and 09-10 looked even better. Denver kept winning, and at the 2010 All-Star break, our guys got to show off together in the main event. Articles from this period paint the sunniest picture of this relationship. Friends? No, but no longer enemies. They were making it work. Soon after that exciting All-Star weekend, though, the coach revealed something he had known for a little while. George Karl, already a cancer survivor, had cancer for the second time, a malignancy spreading from his neck that would require chemotherapy. Karl thankfully got better, but it required a longer, more difficult leave of absence than anticipated, spanning the rest of the 2010 season and playoffs. Playing for interim coach Adrian Dantley, the understandably shaken Nuggets suffered critical injuries and slumped into the postseason. They suffered a grim, grumpy first-round loss against the lower-seeded Utah Jazz. Bad timing for a dip. The Nuggets were ready to offer Melo an extension in the 2010 offseason, but he delayed signing it. Meanwhile, his friends made huge free agent moves and teased him about leaving Denver at his wedding, in front of Nuggets executives. Indeed, by the time Coach Karl came back for 2010 training camp, Melo had not only punted the extension offer, but stoked trade rumors, which turned into a trade request, which turned into tedious months of waiting, then, at last, a mid-season trade to the Knicks. Billups, too. That's a hell of a work situation to return to after a grueling cancer recovery. Once the trade finally resolved the melodrama distraction, Karl fired a giddy parting shot in a TNT interview.
Defense is commitment. You just got to handle what Melo gives you. You got to manage what Melo gives you. Melo's a great offensive player, the best offensive player I've ever coached. But his defensive focus, his demand of himself is what frustrated us more than anything.
Melo's response to media was dismissive. On Twitter, it was a little beefier. I think we know who the snake is here. Each guy enjoyed success in his new situation. Each would weather breakups and tough seasons thereafter. For Karl, that was more player beef, more people calling him a snake. For Melo, it was late career life as more of a journeyman role player than star. Both these guys' careers faded. You know what didn't fade? Beef. After coaching, George Karl leaned fully into a career of multi-platform hateration. In 2016, he published this book. I count 2 shots at Melo right in the subtitle, but if that's too oblique for you, let's read. Carmelo was a conundrum, a user of people, addicted to the spotlight, a low demand of himself on defense, no commitment, an insufficient leader, not as much effort on defense as offense, not a winner, and not happy when called on it. All familiar criticisms, both in that Karl had expressed these sentiments many times before, and in that plenty of others have said the same about Carmelo Anthony. This, however, was something else. Karl singled out Melo and Kenyon Martin as people who had made lots of money but grew up without their fathers and thus weren't shown how to, quote, act like a man. That line, combined with one about J.R. Smith's, quote, distracting posse, ventures past the realm of professional critique and into personal attacks, flecked with trite, racist-sounding language. When those excerpts came out, Smith and Martin told the world how they felt. Melo just sounded tired and laughed it off.
Everybody else is kind of speaking up for me, and they, from their own experience, so I really don't have to speak on it. I never knew it was this much. I never knew I was I don't know, what's the word, conundrum? I don't even know what the hell that means, to be honest with you.
Karl later expressed regret for those lines in his book, but the regular old basketball critiques continued apace. On TV.
How tough was it to coach him?
Melo?
Yeah.
I don't think it was as tough as people think it is. It was frustrating. He could get 10 assists a game. He could get 15 rebounds a game.
You're right.
I think he could be a damn good defender. We never got those buttons pushed to where he would commit to being a triple-double star.
On his own podcast.
He wasn't a rebellious guy, I guess is the best way. He expressed his disappointment passively and sometimes selfishly, mostly selfishly.
What did that look like?
Taking shots that aren't in the shot selection. Basically saying, I'm better than these guys. I deserve more, and I deserve more attention.
On Twitter. Karl's commentary is so persistent, so repetitive, that reporters don't even bother asking Melo about it anymore. Reasonable because Karl has basically confirmed that he just gets a kick out of trolling, despite the response he might receive. This sucks, I think. I don't want to overstate it. Both men can claim successful, fulfilling basketball careers, including their time together. But still, it's a bummer. In an alternate universe, maybe George Karl and Carmelo Anthony become one of those odd sports couples who made it work, who buried their differences or reached the mountaintop in spite of them. In our universe, those differences will define their shared legacy. Melo and George looked fraught from the outset and sometimes brought out each other's worst tendencies. Just when it seemed like winning might help them overcome, real life interrupted, and then the business of basketball divorced them for good. George Karl and Carmelo Anthony never achieved closure, and so all we're left with is a lingering beef. Thank you so much for watching Beef History. If you want to see some more beef, check this out, or maybe this one over here.